All right, so welcome to the Cheap Podcast, Briana Bowley.
Thank you.
Bowley.
Bowley.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to happen. So, you know what was really cool? When I reached out to you on Facebook, I really don't connect with people much on Facebook, but that day I was like, no, I'm feeling, like making new connections. So I reached out to you and one other person, and now both of you I've done a podcast with.
Oh, cool.
It just so happened that the two people that I reached out with really connected well. So
Oh, nice. I love that.
yeah, it's good when you're not approaching it from I'm trying to friend 100 people a day, and instead, literally like energetically, one might say, was like on a similar wavelength, and we had a pretty good discussion.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I actually forget what it was now.
I can't remember either.
A lot around the nervous system.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
martial arts for sure.
Yeah.
So I was thinking today we could get into like a little bit of your journey around martial arts,
Oh.
the entrepreneur's journey.
Yeah.
And definitely some stuff around nervous system regulation and how when a female especially feels safe, then she can be radio. I think that's a really good
Cool.
point to
I
talk
love it.
about. Yeah.
Sounds good.
So martial arts, how long has it been you've been doing now?
It depends how you count it. So, I mean, I started Muay Thai specifically 2014, I want to say. And I stuck with that like pretty consistently for a good maybe 5 years.
Yeah.
Then found like wrestling and jiu-jitsu. Stuck with that for about 3 months, and then I went traveling. So, I mean, I was still very much interested, but it was just like traveling, trying to stick with it. I was getting one session in maybe like once a week, once a fortnight, once a month, maybe, all different coaches because I was traveling. And then took a big chunk of time off and came back to jiu-jitsu at the end of 2021. So what's that? Almost 4 years consistently in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, awesome. And even just to, have those 3 months of like really diving into something, it trains your mindset in that way of thinking. So even if you're not deepening the skill, it's still kind of locked in and you've got your mind thinking that way where you've extended from like the striking of MMA, Muay Thai into MMA. Yeah, so I could see the benefit of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's been quite a while, really, then. I've always wanted to do martial arts. And I think when I was 19, I tried Muay Thai for the first time. Coming off several years of pack-a-day smoking was not a great time to try that. Absolutely died.
Yep.
And that sufficiently deterred me for a while.
Yeah.
And then I reckon I tried a Muay Thai session when I was in Thailand. And just the 5-minute warm-up had me wrecked, let alone the rest of it.
Yeah.
I do find for me, like, the technique of kicking was so hard to get under control, and probably years of, like, bad habits and not having the right posture was so hard to, like, adapt to.
Yeah, it's a very, like, unique hip placement, I think.
Yeah.
Even for me, like, I mean, when I started Muay Thai, it was like, I guess more of like your box fit kind of stuff. Like I'm doing it I just come out of bodybuilding. So it was very much for me, like, I just want to build my cardio without doing running. 'Cause I hate running.
Yeah.
And I remember like my kicks were very like your plastic box fit kind of like, just like shitty kicks.
Yeah.
And it was only when I started getting really into the sport and actually looking at how the pros kick, I was like, that's a completely different movement pattern to what I'm doing. And so I had to relearn to like kind of come out wide rather than, the classic, like almost, I don't even know what you call it, but that like straight up kick that I think you see in a lot of those like more fitness, like kickboxing kind of styles.
Yeah. That's a good baseline to come from though, like from the bodybuilding and already having done like a gym level fitness martial art class, because then at least, you've probably got a good degree of cardio that, say if you go into a martial art class and you're so struggling to catch your breath, technique's not on the cards there, right? But once you've got the conditioning and then you can actually see, I've just been, doing a kick, but now there's actually like levels to this.
Yeah.
Like once you can get to that level, then you can really start to optimize. And I think that's where you would get a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah.
From not just being like, cool, I'm doing a class and getting cardio and kicking, but like I'm actually improving the skill that I can see actual levels to.
Yeah, totally. I think like pros and cons, because for sure, I mean, my cardio was like monstrous when I actually got serious about not being terrible at Muay Thai. But I'd picked up so many bad habits that I had to untrain. You know, like just like shitty non-technical kicks.
Right.
You know, like not having like correct foot placement. And I think also because I'd sort of, you know, like even through my the early stages of my Muay Thai training, I was also getting really interested in the UFC at the time.
Yeah.
So I was playing around, and because I have a lot of friends who are fighters as well, so I was playing around a lot with like wrestling and like, you know, all these other different kind of sports and like MMA. And so the stances are so different.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like I remember my first kind of like, I guess more traditional Muay Thai coach was like, what the fuck is going on with your stance? Like, why are you standing so wide? But it was that like wrestling stance. Yeah. You know, so
yeah, I can see where that would cross over a fair bit.
Yeah, like I think I've always had a bit of like I call it like a mutt kind of like technical game, because it's just
composition of the feet. Then you
and I'm just, you know, like taking stuff from here and then like pieced it together and then had someone try to correct it, and you know, bad habits creep in when I get tired and
yeah. How do you find that affects you on the mat though? Because I could see that being maybe a little bit less predictable and an advantage in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously there's no striking in jiu-jitsu, so that doesn't affect me as much, like the poor technique in like say kicks or whatever. Jiu-jitsu for me, like from when I got started with jiu-jitsu in 2021 and have like stuck it through that entire time, I haven't really been taught. I've been taught good habits from day one kind of thing. So it hasn't really, my Muay Thai journeys are definitely a little bit more of a mixed bag, but my jiu-jitsu has been pretty clear cut from day one.
Yeah.
And it was more so like a matter of, probably my struggle with the jiu-jitsu was like, because there was that chunk of time where I was traveling, it was more so that I just wasn't remembering techniques, because jiu-jitsu is so much, it's so detail orientated.
Yeah.
So I travel and I train with different coaches, and it was like, if I managed to remember something, it would be like a puzzle piece that I didn't know where it fit in with the other puzzle pieces that I had, because I didn't have a coach to connect them.
Yeah.
And if I even remembered the technique, you know. So yeah, it wasn't until years later when I started training consistently that I would have these like memories of techniques pop up, and I'd be like, did I make that up? Like, who did I learn that from?
Yeah.
You know, and then I'd see like a video of a coach that I work with, you know, like once at some stage in, you know, a different state or something, and I'd see their game and be like, oh, that's where I got that from.
Yeah. Interesting how it's stored in there.
Yes.
Like Limitless movie with Bradley Cooper's just
Totally.
having a moment come clear.
Yeah, totally. It's one of them things I found with jiu-jitsu where it's actually really taught me to trust that even when something's not here in my conscious mind, it's somewhere in there, you know. It's one of the things where I often find myself like pulling out a move when, like I said, I'm like, did I make that up?
Yeah.
And then, but it's something stored from, you know, years back.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even with that flywheel where there's unconscious incompetence through to conscious or unconscious competence.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's kind of what we're speaking about here as well, and where martial arts really is evident that if you can do enough practice where you go from concentrating on something, having to learn it, and then getting to the point where it's muscle memory, a reflex, then in the time where you need it, it's going to come naturally. And I guess the more repetitions you do, the more instinctive that's going to be.
Yeah, totally. It's really funny as well. Like I remember my first ever competition as a blue belt, and I was really concerned about my sweep game. So basically like sweep being, you know, like if they're on top, your opponent's on top, switching the position so you end up on top. Because I was like, I consciously don't know any sweeps. And so I was like, I remember going into this match thinking like, shit, I'm just going to have to win off points from the bottom or get a sub from the bottom. And then it was so funny because like I had friends filming the fight, and truth be told, with that fight, I was in survival response. I'd been sick for a week leading in. I couldn't breathe through my nose. So I was in like this high anxiety, just panic state. So I don't even remember the fight. I remember that I was in a fight. I don't remember any of what happened during the fight, the details. And yeah, I watched the video back after, and because my coach said to me when I came off the mats, he's like, "Oh my God, those sweeps." He's like,
And you're like, yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, what sweeps?" And I watched the fight, and I was like, "Oh my God, I did like 5 different types of sweeps during that match. I didn't know that I knew any of them."
Yeah, interesting.
So they're there, just
Yeah.
not consciously.
Yeah.
I mean, they're conscious now, but at the time.
Yeah, and like they had been learned at some point, but not consciously remembered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's quite cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you think, you know, if that were a real life setting, you could see when like survival's even more
Yes.
apparent.
Yeah.
The groundwork you laid can tie up.
Totally. Well, I mean, I lost that match, but what I gained from it was like, oh, I need to actually trust myself more.
Yeah.
And that even when I'm at my worst, I'm actually a lot better than I've given myself credit for.
Yeah.
So it was actually, of course, I would have loved to get that learning and get the gold, but like it was really a mammoth kind of shift in my journey of like, oh, I haven't been believing in myself enough. I haven't been giving myself enough credit for what's actually there.
Absolutely. And that seems to be a thing that shines through from a lot of people that do martial arts is there's a lot of life skills that transfer through the, you know, fighting, succeeding, failing, humbling, all the aspects of that.
Yeah, totally.
And you're an entrepreneur now.
Yes.
What would you say has been some of the key learnings from martial arts that have transferred to you as an entrepreneur?
It's funny because I sometimes struggle to know what I've learned in martial arts that's translated across to entrepreneurship, and what I've learned in entrepreneurship that translates across to martial arts. Because to me, honestly, they're one and the same, and I really, I think because my work does kind of link in closely with working with athletes and fighters, I do actually see them as being one and the same. You know, like of course slightly different expressions, but they are kind of the same thing to me. But if I had to answer your question, I would say probably that piece around like trusting that your unconscious mind knows more than your conscious mind does, and that if you just get out of your own fucking way, you'll figure it out. I've had experiences, you know, like presenting or like being on stage or doing podcast interviews or whatever, where I might be consciously panicking or, you know, thinking like I don't know enough or, you know, or I'm not prepared enough or whatever it may be. And more often than not, it's the times where I just go, you know what, like I'm just going to let my unconscious take the wheel. And I surprise myself. I find myself saying these things where I'm like, where the fuck did that come from?
Yeah.
So that's probably been a big one. And I think also maybe the element of, especially with jiu-jitsu, like jiu-jitsu is a chess match done with the body. And so I think it's very much like when something's not working in your jiu-jitsu career, you have to develop other elements of your game. So it, you know, like even at the moment I'm going through a bit of because I've been training at a certain gym for 3 years, moved to a new gym now. It's like I've built out this whole game that worked really well up in Queensland. The game that I'm trying to play at this gym, you know, these guys they're a different body type, different game. So I'm having to completely build out a whole new game because the game here is kind of the kryptonite to my old game. Yeah. And so don't get me wrong, it's frustrating as hell, but it's like, okay, cool. Like I can keep playing the game that I used to and whinge and complain about the fact that it doesn't work, or I can commit myself to closing the skill gap, you know, and figuring it out, and then having this new game evolve my old game as the two kind of integrate. Yeah. And so I think entrepreneurship's the same, where it's like, you know, if your skill in marketing is getting you to a certain point, but it's not getting you to that next point, you can either sit and like keep doing the same thing and complain when it doesn't work, or you can develop a new game that does work and then let that new game integrate and evolve your old game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And what I think stands out to me there as well, let's say you've been doing a certain way of doing things that's been getting results to a limit. It's good that if you've done that for a while where you feel like you've got all the rewards of having nailed that, kind of like if you read a book and then implement it and then before going on to the next book, because if you're constantly trying to change your game, then you're not locking in the past one. But also in entrepreneurship, let's say that you're trying to continually go ahead. Sometimes that can be defeating. Always, trying to do something else and having to,
Yes.
like, always wanting to learn. But when there's that uncertainty of being in new waters,
Yes.
out of your
Yeah.
depth kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Like, I've been experiencing that lately, and I guess it comes as overwhelm. And then, if I was just focusing on, like, one streamlined thing, executing that well, and then once that's locked in, then moving on.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's like another way of saying that, and this is the other thing that I've really taken from martial arts, is that you've got to know when to do it the way you've always done it. You've got to know when to try something new and take a risk.
Yeah.
And so like in jiu-jitsu, like there's times where, like, if you're going into a comp and you're planning to, like, fuck it, I might try this technique that I saw on YouTube last night, and that's, you're going to trial that in a competition. It's like, you might pull it off. And that would even be like a case by case kind of discernment piece. But it's probably not the most intelligent thing, like, generally speaking.
You could think 9 times out of 10 that's not the right way to approach.
Versus, like, I've been having conversations with my new training partners at this new gym about, like, okay, cool, like, I'm really struggling with this element of my game. Like, can we try X, Y, Z? Even last night I messaged one of my training partners saying, like, because I've just started judo in the last, basically since November, with the intent of building that into my jiu-jitsu. And at the moment, they feel like two very different sports. And part of that is because I've had a lot of my bigger injuries have been because of either me not break falling correctly or someone executing a takedown really poorly, and I've popped out ribs, and I've, and the kind of injuries where you're in pain for a solid 12 weeks and can't do much.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm quite timid with takedowns. And so I'm like, there's a capacity that I need to build, and I need to be really picky about who I practice building that capacity with, because if I go and get injured again because someone does something scuzzy, it's going to put me off the sport completely. So I messaged a teammate last night and said, hey, like, I want to integrate these two different sports. I really trust you. He's a black belt in judo. So I'm like, I really trust you. Can we start our jiu-jitsu rounds standing up so that in a safe space, I can practice integrating this new skill into my old skills.
Yeah.
So,
That actually touches on a bit of life wisdom that I've been considering lately. The people you expose yourself to, and especially in new ventures, like, imagine someone goes into a relationship and it's someone that doesn't treat them well, and they're like, oh, that's not for me. Or someone tries a new sport, martial art, whatever it is. The immediate feedback you get, like, recently I'm doing shadow work certification. Like, imagine if I was like, I'll work with anyone, and then I get someone like not an ideal client and it goes like really badly, and then the immediate feedback you get is like, ooh,
yes,
that's not safe, doesn't feel good, this isn't for me. So I think it's really important to identify, like, who's the ideal person to be training with or working with, not expose yourself to people or experiences that are going to be harsh on you.
It's very much, and actually this is definitely something that I've learned from martial arts and fed into entrepreneurship. It's that discernment and going at your own pace. I think especially as a woman in martial arts, and generally one of the smaller people on the mats, I've learned the hard way that, like, if you're not discerning and you try and push yourself into something before you're ready, you're going to get hurt, you're going to be afraid of the sport, and it's going to take you a hell of a lot longer to want to actually get back in there. Versus, like, now, and call it maybe wisdom born from ignorance, I suppose.
It's the best kind.
Yes. Now I'm so picky about who I roll with. I'm so discerning about when I roll with certain people based on where I'm at mentally and physically. And also just, like, I don't push myself to jump in and do things before I feel ready, because I know that if I'm, there's a saying that I live from, which is where you create from determines what you create. And so it's like, if I'm going into, say, a judo round and I'm already, like, panicked before I've even stepped on the mats, like, I'm going to be a total spaz, probably hurt myself, potentially hurt my training partner. Fuck no, like, no one wins in that context. So making sure that I'm in, like, the ideal state, or as close as possible as I can get to that, before I go and push myself beyond my current capacity.
Yeah, totally. And if you come at it from the energy of like, oh, I need to prove myself.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Yeah, and that tends to not work out too well.
Yeah. I think, that's the younger me definitely used to, I push myself beyond in the name of like, well, I don't want them to think that I'm weak, or I don't want them to think that I'm being so
It makes sense as a woman in a traditionally male field.
Yes.
That's going to happen in, like you see that in mining as well, like when women are in that, like they feel the need to compensate.
Yes.
I think that's understandable, but then there's going to be a point where it's detrimental to the person.
Totally. Yeah. And I see so many women who are dealing with burnout or like hormonal challenges or all sorts of things. And it's like, because you're a female trying to fit yourself into a system that's not built for women.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is coming more to light, the difference between men, women and cycles, like the constant push versus phasic.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
For sure. So that was the other thing that I was thinking about, the entrepreneur's journey and the desire to go back to working a job.
Yes.
Which kind of leads on from what I was saying before, where that overwhelmed, like I'm literally like at that point now where I'm like trying to, marketing, media, delivery, everything. I'm like, man, it'd just be so good to give my brain a rest from all this focus diverted in so many different directions. The idea of getting a job for 6 weeks and just not having to think would be great.
Yeah, totally.
But I've also done that a few times, and I know there is a phase where the financial security and momentum is good, but it's literally like I can see my Maslow's hierarchy being filled, and that like base level need of money quickly gets filled, and then I'm like, okay, no, I don't need this. Like within like 2 weeks.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, it's interesting. In saying that, I think more is lost through inaction than wrong action. Yeah. So me sitting here and being like, no, I shouldn't do that, but then fluffing around and not being effective at what I'm doing. Could be better to spend 2 weeks going and working and be like, you know what, now I'm back. Yeah. With more energy.
Yeah, well, it's this interesting thing because I think that there's like this really unusual, I'm going to call it like a shame mechanism that I think plays out in entrepreneurship that like, and I maybe this is my own perception based on what I've experienced. Tell me if this resonates for you or not, but it's almost like you've failed if you go and get a job 100%. Or like somehow you're like inferior if you go, like if you're an employee.
Yeah. It's like when you are on the entrepreneur's journey, like I broke free from the 9 to 5. I'm not a slave to the matrix. Yeah. I've worked it out. And then it depends on how much you've lent into that identity. You're stepping away from that too. Yeah. You're like, I'll never go back to it. And you've made claims like that. Then there's going to be a bit of incongruence in what you've previously stated. Yeah. Fortunately, this time I was like, maybe I will go back. Maybe I won't. Yeah. In the past, I definitely stated I'll never do it. And I did.
Totally. Well, yeah, I look back on my journey and I'm like, there were so many times where I really wanted to just get a job in the name of having that little bit of financial pressure alleviated. Yeah. But I didn't because my ego was like, no, that's like you've failed or, like what people are going to think. And I think back now and I'm like, man, like I could have made it so much fucking easier on myself and like gone so much further, so much quicker if I just got out of my own way and actually allowed myself to shift out of survival state quickly, because I think that is the thing when for whatever reason, if it's financial, if it's like a capacity thing, if it's circumstantial, maybe something's happened behind the scenes with family or whatever it may be, and running a business is feeling heavy, and what's going to be supportive of shifting out of that is getting a job. That is the quickest way to get out of survival. Yeah. When you can kind of like take that code of responsibility off, even just temporarily. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you? So I look back and I'm like, oh, if only I knew back then what I know now, I would have lightened the burden for myself, so much quicker.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the thing of like having to feel like you have to try and break through and make it. And then like when you get stuck at that point of resistance, like if you're not moving forward there, like better to try something different.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because I think for me personally, like there's been a really strong polarity or like duality where I was working in mining or like civil, so it's like 80 hours a week. And then like I'm like, it makes sense, like 3 to 5 grand a week, and I'll just, stack cash and then I can have 6 months runway. What I've come to realize though is in the effort of gaining that runway, you often deplete your nervous system, your inner well-being.
Yeah.
Where that can literally take as long as it took to earn that money to then recover.
Yeah.
So that 6 months you have to work on your business is actually 6 months of recovery.
Yeah.
And now there's a sweet point. Like if you do 4 weeks, like sometimes I've literally felt it be really healing to be in a truck, listening to music, and I'm like, oh, this is so much like just the regeneration that I needed. It was something to occupy my mind, but make money and not focus. But then there's a point where it's a tip off, where it's diminishing returns, where then all the practices that you have, whether it's sport, whether it's, healthy eating, journaling, meditation, yoga, you can't really sustain that doing 84 hours a week.
Yeah.
So all of those things that make you get stripped away.
Totally.
And I think that's why a lot of people in mining particularly struggle, because your identity, basically gets taken away based on the things you do and you adapt to that environment. But I do think there can be benefit for a short term. But yeah, definitely like once you're getting pretty much past 10 weeks for me, that's...
Yeah. Well, I think there's also like an element of, like, I mean, I've said to clients in the past who've kind of been on the fence of like, do I get a job or do I figure it the fuck out in the business? I think you've got to, if you're going to get a job, do it with strategy in mind, because I think, and I see this a lot, like if we use mining as an example, someone's burnt out in business, they go and get the mining job so that there's that quick kind of like,
cashew.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, what's that saying, that like old cliche of like the more you earn, the more you spend?
Oh yeah.
I think if you're not managing your money well, it's so easy to fall into that, and I've done that. I've done that in my business where I've had like mammoth, income months and then been like, wait a minute, how did I end up with, like the same bank balance as before, despite this, mammoth increase in income. So I think there needs to be an element of like planning with that in mind, so that, you can kind of go in, have your like cash injection or your income injection, and then have that be the thing that it sets the foundation for a longer period of time, so that you're not trapped in that like cyclical kind of like doing it for the money and, avoiding quitting, because if you quit, then there goes the income.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly it. When you can go in with an intention of a duration, because personally, when I was working in mining, I was like, oh, this is my income now, and I'm thinking about it being forever. Then there was a level of depletion of my inner well-being, and that void I was trying to fill with external things, which was needing that money.
Yes, exactly.
And so I think that's for a lot of things too. Like if you go into a relationship, a job, a house environment, and you know that it's for a short duration, it's a lot easier to be tolerant and be like, okay, I can put this aside and I can just deal with it because, it's only for this amount of time.
Yeah.
But when you think, okay, this is how things are going to be forever, that's when it really drains you and you're like, nah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's interesting. Like for me, I mean, I went through a phase actually not that long ago, where I was really burnt out from being, I guess, in like a forward facing kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, like public figure role in my business, like I am my brand, right? And so I got to the point where I was like, I'm tired of this. Like social media is largely a very judgmental place. You got to have a thick skin. You've got to be willing to, be projected on and misunderstood often, especially if you're wanting to grow your business. And so I went through this phase where I was like, I don't know know if that's for me. Like, I don't know if I want to be the dancing monkey. And, you know, and I was considering, like, years down the track, if I decide to have kids, like, do I want to have children brought into the world where, you know, their mum's got social media eyes on them all of the time. And so I was kind of like weighing up all of these things, and I was too burnt out from that to show up in my business. And so, I mean, thankfully for me, I was in a position where I still have clients coming in and, you know, consistent enough income even from not showing up on the front end.
Yeah.
But to supplement that, I was like, well, fuck it. And I actually went and got a job working for a friend of mine doing like all his behind the scenes social media. So people would be contacting him, and he was, you know, the big loud, like showy guy on the front end of the brand. But behind the scenes, it was me answering the emails and doing like a lot of the kind of sales calls and stuff like that. And that was like a really beautiful reset for me of like, you know, like still getting to do the work that I love, still being in interaction with people and supporting them through transformation and nervous system work and so on, but not having to be the dancing monkey at the front of the stage.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and for me, that was a beautiful clarity piece, because I came out of that going, I actually started to notice myself as time went on working within his company. I was like, oh, I'm actually like a little bit jealous. Like, I'm seeing him up the front doing all the speaking and doing all the promoting and like getting the comments and, you know, the direct interactions of people. And I'm like, where's mine?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so that for me was like my answer of like, oh no, this is actually what I want to do. And there's skills that I need to build upon if I want to be able to do that and not burn out this time around.
Yeah, totally. And I think that speaks to the benefit of like taking that different action and taking the pressure off yourself.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, that is really interesting, because being adjacent to it where you're still doing the back end stuff, you know, you can still you see it and just like, oh, cool, it's not me. And I can just imagine the phases you went through of relief through to that actual yearning.
Yeah. And I mean, I was watching, and this is in no way to knock him and how he does things, but I would watch how he would do things, and I would go, no, I would do it that way, you know, or like, it was like I was consistently filtering his work through how I would do it if it was my own work.
Yeah.
And so that for me was like, oh, this is telling me something. The fact that even though I've removed myself from my work to work for him, I'm still filtering his work through the lens of what I would do.
Yeah.
That's pretty telling. So I think it's about like having the courage to go and find out, you know, go and find out what works for you and what doesn't.
And that's a really good point that I've realized for myself, is when you see someone else doing something you want to, and you think, oh yeah, I'll do it like this. That just right there, how much inspiration that gives you to take action. Yeah,
I really think like we're always giving ourselves clues. You know, it's just like whether, like, do we have the courage to be honest with ourselves? And for me, that was the clue. Like, hang on, I'm working in this guy's business, but I'm filtering it through the lens of like, would I do it this way in my business? You know, it was pretty telling.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, circling back to the whole social media, putting yourself out there, the vulnerability that goes with that. I've had quite a journey, because I've definitely been averse to showing up on camera. So when I think the first time I ever had like any online social video interaction, I was working with a property developer, and he's like, yeah, meet the team. And I was like meant to do a little presentation. And the amount of pressure I put on myself, I was like choking so hard, to the point that my left arm was going numb.
Oh, wow.
And I was like literally thinking I'm like having a heart attack here. And then going from there and starting the coaching journey, and then trying to record a video speaking directly to the camera. And I think I literally did like 50 takes.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, I still feel like I'm not great, but I'm working on it and I'm willing to do it. And just the self-growth that comes from that, in being willing to put yourself out there when not seen as perfect, and just kind of accepting yourself as you are, which is really required in the entrepreneurial journey.
Yes, definitely. And celebrating you for, I mean, look, here we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Celebrating you for, jumping in and sticking with it. Because I think that there is I catch myself putting this pressure on myself as well in different facets of my life, but it's like, as humans, we seem to have this like funny, especially high performers, we have this funny expectation of ourselves that like we're going to just jump into something new and be good at it immediately.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not how it works.
No.
You know, as kids, like we're not birthed knowing how to speak Italian fluently. So why the fuck would we expect ourselves to, you know, be fluent in money management or be fluent in speaking on camera if we haven't got the reps up? You know?
That's maybe because high performers, generally speaking, perhaps have one area or more baseline things where they're like reasonably good at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, for me personally, I think it's like, I would say that I'm a jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah.
And I mean, that for me, like seeing how my business has kind of unfolded, I think it's actually my genius, being able to connect different things. But
yes.
I think I've always been someone who I'm good at things quickly, you know, like I've always been relatively intelligent, good at most sports pretty instantly, less as I've grown up, but, you know, I've like played instruments and stuff, picked them up pretty quickly, you know, comparatively kind of thing. And so I think that became my identity, where I would expect that was always the case, you know. And I also think that, you know, for others, and to some degree myself as well, it's that thing of social media has kind of created that, especially when it comes to like posting videos and things like that. You know, we see Hermosi, you know, like these big dogs showing up on social media where like they've got a whole team behind them. Who knows how many takes they take? Who knows how much editing goes into it? They've had, you know, hundreds, thousands, if not tens of thousands of reps on the board.
Yeah.
And so we're expecting ourselves to be like that when we don't see everything that goes on in the background.
And that's the thing, right? Virality shows people who have put in the reps and they've got the overnight success, and you don't see the background. Because like you look at a lot of YouTube accounts, like there's some to hit big quickly, but often it's like hundreds of videos.
Yeah.
And then it's only coming to your awareness at the polished end version.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, well, that's what it takes.
Yes.
And that's a bit of the challenge, I think, as well. There's what is required of success, and there's what you're capable of in this moment.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, well, you know, Hermosi says I need to put out 3 reels a day and I need to, you know, speak to 100 leads. What I have the capacity to do is this.
Yes.
So now I'm not going to be successful.
Yeah.
And I've definitely been like, okay, I've got to set these goals and do them. But then that's equal burnout because I'm overreaching what I can do.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like having to accept that, okay, I'm going to be doing this and that, and it's not the quality that the market would want or like respond well to, but also I'm not putting out enough, and like I'm just going to have to accept that there's this phase and eventually it'll get better.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that thing, right, of like we're always going to align with whoever's most aligned for us. So, you know, like, yes, for you, maybe if you've only got the capacity to put out 1 reel a day, you're probably not going to attract the same clientele as, say, Hermosi. And you're going to attract the people who are ready for your wisdom at the level you're at. And I think, you know, I mean, Joe Rogan, let's use him as an example. Like that we call him the podfather, right?
Oh, yeah.
Who knows? I've lost count of how many podcasts he's
Probably be cracking 2,000 if not past that.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to his first ever episode?
I actually haven't.
Trash.
Really?
Like, I think the first 30 minutes is literally just like, you know, like all this noise on the mic and like, you know, just like, it's just a nightmare. Like it's literally a recording of them trying to figure out their tech. Wow. And then having a little like, it's almost like, it's so bad that it's like, well, it's so bad that it's almost like, did they mean to record this? Like, was this just someone had their phone recording while 2 dudes were just shooting the shit, you know, in an office somewhere? Like, it's that terrible.
There's a lot to be learned from that though, right? Where his willingness to put out something, like he obviously wasn't thinking, is this good enough?
Yeah.
He was like, all right, episode 1 done, like move on to 2. And you could definitely see where that attitude has led him to 2,000 episodes, and he's great in that podcasting now.
And what I love is that he never deleted it.
Yeah.
Like it's still, I mean, it took me, because someone mentioned it to me and I was like, how bad can it be? And I scrolled to try and find it and listen, and I was like, no, it really is that bad. But it's like, it would have been so easy for him to delete that. Didn't it? you know? And so like, I really love that, like showing our, like, you know, the early stages, the shitty stages.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that goes to show, like, you know, the fact that he didn't delete it. He's not there trying to cultivate an image. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
Like, it probably wasn't worth his time to go and do that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We've got to stop holding ourselves to these ridiculous levels when we just haven't got the reps on the board.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I come to a point of acceptance, like, okay, you know, probably the first 100 podcasts, like, not going to be great. Like, accept that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's the same as, like, I mean, I did, back when I had my podcast, I think I've done 125 episodes.
Nice.
And, like, I die a little bit inside when someone tells me that I've gone and listened to an old episode. You know, like the first ones were horrific. Even the ones like my 125th episode, you know, I mean, the last time I recorded was back in 2021, I think. So I've grown a bunch since then, and I would do it very differently now. And so, you know, every now and then I'll get someone be like, hey, like I listened to your episode with blah, blah, blah the other day. And I'm like, you know, and like, I mean, one part of me loves that they're still out there, you know, landing with people. People are still taking the time to listen. There's obviously enough value in there that people want to listen. But I'm like, you know, it's not how I do it now. You know, so it's, I mean, that's growth, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Even from things that I had written 12 to 24 months ago. And so like there's a book I've been working on, and then I'm like, oh, I'm just going to polish that a bit.
Yeah.
The wisdom's evolved since then.
Yes, totally.
But then also, let's say I keep doing this perpetually in 20 years, I'm like, well, just go, they're going to be out there providing value.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There is that part of it.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, I mean, that's something we've got to learn to honor, like the past versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
Like even I posted 2 days ago, I posted some old fight footage from my very first jiu-jitsu comp. So I was 6 months into training, you know, seriously, I suppose. And at the time, I was like, yeah, like I rocked the fuck out of that. And it was a dominant win, but I was like, I thought it was a really clean, precise win. And it was for the level that I was at the time. I look back and I'm like, oh, you know, like that was bad.
You familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
No.
Yeah, so there's this good graph, and it shows along the x-axis competence, along the y-axis confidence. When competence is at the least, confidence is at its highest. And then you dig down as you realize how little you know, and then eventually it's a slow building up of confidence and confidence.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, I've had that both with my martial arts journey, with my entrepreneurship journey, where it's like, you know, I mean, I remember when I first started my business, I was 18. And my mum said to me, like, are you sure? You know, like, running a business is hard. And I was like,
Old people.
like, what would you know? Like, how hard can running a business be? And then I went through this stage where I was, like, getting annihilated by business. And now I'm getting to the point where I feel like the confidence is back in the upwards. But for so long, I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. There's too many hats to wear. You know, and same with martial arts. It's like they talk about blue belt blues, where it's like white belt, you think you're killing it because you don't know what you don't know. Blue belt is when you're like, you're no longer considered a beginner. People start going a little bit harder on you. All of a sudden you realize these motherfuckers have been going easy on me this whole time, lulling me into this false sense of security. You know, and then it's like you go through this like bout of like low-key depression through blue belt where you're like, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. I'm still deep in that, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. You know, and then it slowly starts to kind of climb again as you get up into the higher ranks.
Yeah. I think it's important though to have that initial peak of confidence, even the lack of confidence, because it's that can give you the motivation, courage to get through when you've actually committed to something and you're like, no, I'm going to work it out. Exactly.
Well, I mean, I think if I had have known how hard business can be when, like, if I knew that when my mum said to me, are you sure business is really hard? I would have been like, no, fuck it. I'll go get a job.
Exactly.
So it was largely my ignorance that actually had me hit go. And then I'd already built, I guess, enough
Momentum.
Well, yeah. And I guess enough grit to be like, all right, well, this far now, so I might as well keep going. And same with martial arts, I think if I had known how fucking hard it would be at times, I probably wouldn't have started. Whereas it's, I've built enough grit now, and I guess invested enough of myself at this point in my journey that I'm like, well, might as well keep going. Like, I'm almost halfway to black belt, so no point quitting now,
Yeah, I think that's key as well. Like when you do come up against resistance, that as you work through that and you build trust in yourself, when things come up, I can overcome them, and I have it within me to dig deep and work it out.
Yeah,
that inner self-trust would be really key.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there's a thing called blue belt syndrome, where people will do different martial arts, get to blue belt, and then just jump to the next, and we don't got blue belt in all different.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so when I did Kung Fu a few years ago, the Shifu that I had was telling me about that. I was like, yeah, interesting. I was like, I could probably see how that translates to some areas of my life. Just get to that point of say white belt, and you're going I'm really good at this, I'm really good at this. So you just keep jumping to things, so you're not actually getting to the critical part, which would be difficult.
Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I've framed it in a different way where I'm I like to think, because I really resonate with what you said, like a jack of all trades, master of none, where I feel like my life has very much taken me on different paths. So many different avenues: mining, office work, quite a range of things, yoga teaching, and then, being able to relate to many different people has really brought me into a good place to then be a coach, because kind of whoever it is, I can kind of adapt to it.
Yeah.
But, there could also be that lens of I've tried all these different things and when it got hard. But then there's the other side of that, what's not aligned, because you don't want to stay in something where it's genuinely not for you. Let's say, I could choose something and it goes easy, and then it's hard, and I'm like, if I'm not really invested in it, then is it worth all that effort to do it? But on the other side of that, I can really see the duality. There's things where you do want to not just shy away from a challenge, and when it gets difficult, because that's going to cultivate, a quitting attitude. On the other side, you got to work out when's the wise time to quit. When is the time when something's not aligned, and there's just resistance that's telling you this isn't for you.
Yeah. Well, I think, the thing with the whole jack of all trades, master of none is I don't believe we're ever not on path. It's just, do we have the wisdom to find the gold in the different trades? I look at the work that I do now. I feel like I found my niche. I found my thing to go deep on. But it took me going surface level on a million different things to bring that all together. And, someone once said to me, because I used to get really caught up on it of I don't have a niche, I don't know who I'm working with, and all of that. And it was actually someone I interviewed on my podcast said to me, he's well, that's actually a genius in and of itself. And he explained to me that it's the difference between, say, an eye doctor, right? Someone who's their whole craft is understanding the eye, right? Versus someone else who knows a little bit about the eye, a little bit about the gut, a little bit about your fascial system, a little bit about how stress impacts different aspects of the body. And they might be able to see then well, hang on, if you're stressed, your gut isn't processing food properly, your gut might have this impact on your eye, and that's why you're having vision problems. But the eye doctor doesn't know to look at the gut or to look at stress, because all they know is the eye. Right? And so that's been my experience with my work, where it's I can step into realms that no one else can touch because they haven't played in those realms. It's the same with my martial arts. I have this one friend of mine who, she's a lot higher ranked than me, but all she's ever done is jiu-jitsu. And so sometimes I'll do things and she's like, what the fuck was that? I didn't know what to do with that. And I put it down to Muay Thai. Muay Thai had me develop a certain level of grit, a certain level with being okay with someone being a bit rough with me, or clinching and throwing me around. The wrestling had me develop a certain kind of again, a level of grit, a level of work ethic, a level of like dynamicness. And then the judo, I'm watching judo integrate, you know, these aspects of like knowing how to work when someone's got really heavy grips, or, you know, not feeling so afraid when it comes to when someone wants to stand up with me. And so, you know, it's kind of this thing of like, well, yeah, you could say that like if I hadn't just invested in jiu-jitsu the entire time of my martial arts career, if you want to call it that, I mean, I think I'd be close to black belt now, if not already a black belt. But my preference is honestly to be the blue belt that I am now, with all of this other knowledge, which is actually meaning that when I get to black belt, I'm going to be a different level of black belt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I resonate with that. And that's kind of the challenge in society, right? Because we're, from a societal point of view, encouraged to be a specialist in one area. And like you said, with the eye doctor, that could be beneficial. If you have something wrong with your eye, that's probably who you want to go to.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're working out what is the right approach and how to be cognizant of all the areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to have someone that's got a holistic approach.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even like I look back at, you know, like my early days in like out of school, you know, I was a personal trainer for a bit. I made coffee at a cafe for a bit. I packed shelves in the dairy aisle for a bit, you know, and like even those things, like I can see how they added to my mastery now in my craft. You know, I can see how, like working in a cafe had me learn how to handle pressure, you know, in fast moving environments, how it taught me how to deal with, you know, like disgruntled customers in stressful dynamics. Even packing the shelves at, you know, in the dairy aisle, like that affirmed for me people management skills, because there were a lot of I guess management elements behind the scenes. And even down to like probably the most valuable thing that I learned from packing shelves at Foodland was that that's not meant for me.
Yeah.
You know, like that was a thing where I was like, no, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's all stacking. We're never not on path.
Absolutely. No pun stacking. That's very true, Dottie, that so much can be learned from doing something and being like, yeah, this isn't for me. Like, I'm sure, I think it's in maybe the book, The Way of the Superior Man by David Dinger, and like it's about masculine, the masculine approach for men. And basically it says something like, in the effort of finding your purpose, sometimes there'll be layers to it, and you might find that you're like, oh, my purpose is, you know, creating a certain thing in business. And until you do it, you might not realize, okay, that's not the highest form of purpose. And that you need to go through that to come to that realization. And then you can be like, actually, it's this in business. And you can kind of keep expanding.
Yeah.
But it's only through meeting your own truth where you're at.
Yes. Well, even, I mean, it makes me think of like the mention of the mining industry. I have this incredible friend who is a fucking weapon as a coach. And he came from the mining industry, became miserable working in the mines, made a lot of money, but became miserable, basically said fuck you to the industry and left because of it not being conducive with, you know, quality mental health and so on. Got into coaching, did extremely well in coaching, financially speaking, but voiced to it there was something missing. And then one day his old boss from the mines rang him and they had a conversation, and he's like, well, what are you doing these days? And he said, well, I'm working predominantly in like men's mental health. He's like, well, hey, like we're facing a lot of issues with the guys out here. Name your price. How much would you charge for like to fly in and fly out as like a support to these guys in the mines, right? So he's now making a mammoth amount of money, and it's like, oh, that was the missing link, you know?
Yeah.
So it was actually combining the two worlds. It was him having the lived experience of how shitty the environment of the mines can be, and that it wasn't the right fit for him, getting into coaching, falling in love with that, but still having something missing, and then like bridging the two is like, that's a sweet spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You what I've found is really interesting. Like, let's say when you get to that point of like where he was, where he's like, yeah, this is great, but there's still something missing. When you come to that realization within yourself, where you have that like really strong felt desire, it is when that call comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Hey, and like, I think that's really something I'm fascinated with, like the energetics of how that is. And it's often like, I mean, you get that strong desire that these chance meetings and opportunities seem to occur.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's so funny as humans, I think we avoid it, like when we don't feel a sense of certainty or we don't feel really clear on our next steps, it's like, it's an uncomfortable feeling. But that's always like, there's always, like a newness birthed from the void, like there's always something growing from being born from death. So it's if we can sit in the discomfort of nothingness, like something juicy always springs up,
Absolutely. Like I've realized a funny thing this week that when I started my journey to be of service to others, it was because I found a place of stillness within that I wanted to share with others. Like I come to a point where I found, inner stillness, and I was like, okay, like I want to help others with this. And what was ironic, that was in the pursuit of making that marketable, I'd actually lost that inner stillness that I was then trying to help others with. So then by the time I'm going to help people now, I'm like, actually, I don't have the thing that I was selling in the first place. So that's quite a paradox. And I've realized now that, that's probably where a bit of this resistance is of wanting to go back to work. But really what I'm wanting is to find that inner stillness so I can be in congruence with what I was trying to achieve in the first place.
Well, can I pick at that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Is it that the stillness is gone, or is it just that you're learning how to hold that stillness at a deeper level?
Well, it's not gone because it's always there, but that I see what you're saying there, that I was looking at it from without any resistance, I was able to hold it.
Yeah.
And then with resistance, it's not felt.
Yeah.
So yes, you're right. I still like the idea of having it though.
Totally. Yeah, it's this interesting thing because I remember, like the thing is, so I teach nervous system regulation, right? You know what the most dysregulating thing is for me? My nervous system regulation coaching business, right? Like it dysregulates the fuck out of me at times. And so there's been, and I'll be really forthcoming in saying there's been times in my journey where I've been like, I'm a fucking fraud. Like I'm dysregulated as shit sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, how can I be teaching people this when I'm not embodying it? But what I came to realize is that I'm at a different level to my clients with it. So the things that I'm moving through in the pursuit of, well, I don't even want to call it a pursuit, but in the nuances that I'm playing in are depths that my clients can't even touch yet, And so like I remember actually having a conversation with a really close friend who gets this work about it, and I was like, I kind of feel like a fraud, like I'm feeling dysregulated consistently at the moment and I just can't shift it. And she was like, well, talk to me about it. Like, what are you noticing? And I voiced to her like, well, I'm really aware that I wake up in the morning and I'm in freeze. She's like, how do you know that? And I was like, well, because I just know what freeze feels like in my system. And she's like, okay, so talk me through it. I was like, well, it's like a heaviness, there's like a sluggishness, I don't feel on. Like it's like I'm still half asleep. And she was like, okay, cool. Most of your clients don't even know that they're in freeze. Most of them couldn't tell you the first thing about what freeze feels like for them. They wouldn't know how to get out of it, and so which in a nutshell, it made me realize like, I'm just playing at a different level to my clients, and we're always becoming, right? So it's always this journey of like, okay, cool. I've mastered regulation at this level. Yeah. Let's add in a bunch of other shit, and I just start. And now figure out how to regulate at that level. Yeah. And then as you excel at that, add in something else. How do I learn how to regulate and hold it at that level? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's probably been a detriment or something that I've done for quite a while, where I get to a point of dysregulation and then I'm like, I need to just wipe the table clean and have a year off. Yeah. And I think there's probably, some sense in having sprints and having a bit more structured downtime where I can create systems that allow things to keep going. So then when I come back, all the gains that I made in the past sprint are lost.
Yeah. This is the thing, right? Because I see it all the time, and it's becoming more and more a common conversation, there's almost this like people knocking nervous system regulation and claiming that it's a form of avoidance, you know, as in like, oh, like you're avoiding stress, you're avoiding dysregulation in the name of being regulated all the time. And I think that's a very incomplete perception of what nervous system regulation is. Because like in my work, for example, yes, to some degree, we're looking at, okay, like what's the things that are stressing you out and how can we not have those things consistently stress you out? But it's not a matter of stepping away from those things. It's about building your capacity to be able to hold them and letting go of the things that stress you out that aren't actually conducive with where you're wanting to go. You know, it will be the same thing. Like for me, I think of like some of the dysregulation that I used to kind of deal with when I was younger and like early 20s, you know, like teens kind of thing. And a lot of it was because I was hanging out with toxic people who were drunk all the time, using drugs. You know, for me, I was eating junk food, all of that sort of stuff. And like I could build my capacity to be able to handle that stuff, or I could remove myself from those environments. You know, so complete nervous system regulation, not the kind of like fancy like marketed stuff where you're regulated all the time, but true nervous system regulation is a mixture of building your capacity to be able to hold more so that you can live this epic big life without living in perpetual burnout and stress, but also like removing the unnecessary stresses that are actually just pulling you off course.
Yeah, that's so key. Environment and who you're choosing to expose yourself to. Yeah, the dysregulation when there's no purpose or need for it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and it's also, you know, there's an element as well of like drawing to completion the old stressors or the old patterns from past traumas, so that they're not kind of like filling your bucket of capacity with mud, you know, and then basically having it already capped before you even go, you know, start your day kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a key one that I think a lot of people have unhealed trauma or unprocessed emotion.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many things that factor into that. And some of the tricky things with, you know, trauma, like you experience at the time and maybe don't have the resources to handle it. So then, you know, it stores as trauma.
Yes.
And then the problem is, you know, you don't want to look at that for a long time. And it's usually when you eventually get enough distance between the experience and then you can recognize, okay, hang on, like I've got past that, you know, that was years ago, but still my baseline seems way down.
Yeah.
And then eventually you've done all of the basic things, like I've changed diet, I've changed food, you know, changed diet, I've changed exercise, you know, I've cut out things, but still there's something weighing me down. And then at that point you're like, okay, maybe there's something I need to look at from the past. And then you're the whole process of unpacking and yeah, interesting. I was going to say before as well, you know, as you were saying, some people shit on nervous system regulation. There's really been like the rise of the contrarian in the effort of getting clout these days, hey, where someone will take a commonly known thing and then they'll be like, no, you know what, like that's incorrect. Yeah. It's actually what I think.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like we look at, for every cause, there has to be its opposite. You know, like, so of course, if, you know, if I'm out here preaching nervous system regulation, there has to be someone who's against it. And I also think, I mean, that's the beauty of evolution, right? Like, I might have a concept about regulation. Someone might come, you know, pop up and shit on it. And then I'll be like, actually, they've got a good point. How can I build on that? How can I integrate that, build on it? You know, so it is this, like, like you said, it's a little bit of a like shitting on something in the name of like, no, like my way is the way. Yeah. But I also think it's really conducive to like, let's be fucking better. Let's challenge each other in the name of supporting each other.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you can take the personal offense out of it and then see like, do they have a point or not, then you can actually evolve what yours.
Yes. Yeah. And I do think there is a difference, you know, in saying that or between like, hey, like Jeremy, like your way is shit. you don't know what you're doing. My way is the way, versus me being like, well, hey, actually, like you said this thing, I'm curious, you know, like
totally,
there is
the delivery intact.
Yeah, yes, the tact element is, you know, and whether it is like a competitive, you know, me versus you thing and us versus them thing, or whether it's intended as being conducive and constructive and so
Yeah, totally. Typically you see it in like more mainstream like theories or at high level people. Like I once saw a coach be like, yeah, Maslow's hierarchy is good, but it's incomplete. It's flawed in this way. I was like, okay, maybe, but like it also felt like it was, you know, wow, who's this person to be able to say that, you know, confidence that that's incorrect?
Yeah.
They must have, you know, a high degree of authority, and it just kind of immediately elevates their standing.
Yeah. Yes. Good old social media coaches.
Yeah. Yeah. Social media, just want to check in, like, are you feeling like going for a little bit longer?
Yeah, I'm happy to chat for them as well.
Yeah, cool. I was going to circle back to social media and the climate that is social media these days. Do you think it's got worse? You know, like if you look at like comments in Facebook and like just that, like, or has it always been like that and we're just kind of seeing it more?
My perspective, and this is why it's an interesting game for me to play, being someone who teaches nervous system regulation and markets through a place like social media. What I've witnessed is that TikTok changed the game massively. And I think, and not in a, well, I mean, there's two sides to everything, right? So I want to say that TikTok changed it in a negative sense because it is so, like I would say that it encourages dysregulation. You know, TikTok is very much, it grabs your attention quickly. They're short, you know, short reels, you're on to the next and you're just like down the rabbit hole very quickly. And so you look like no one has an attention span anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I had the conversation with a friend last year about like the difference of like what we consider charisma nowadays. You know, like you look at the old talk show hosts from like the 90s and stuff, and they were a picture of relaxation, you know, and that was what charisma was considered to be. They'd be sat back in their chair, you know, like taking up space and speaking slowly and listening and, you know, like leaving space.
Yes.
And that was entertainment, right? And that was someone holding a room. Whereas now, I mean, I see certain influencers who speak like this and they're like grabbing your attention, that is da-da-da-da, and there's lots of colors and there's lots of movement and it's like, that's entertainment? Like, hang on, that's an anxiety response. Like, that's a perpetual state of like high-strung fight or flight response.
That's 3 Red Bulls in there.
Yeah, and it's like, oh no, I'm just a chaotic girly. And it's like, no, like you're heading towards inevitable burnout. Calm the fuck down, you know, and actually get in your body. And so I cringe because I know, and I've had this conversation so many times over, I know that my social media following could be fucking popping off if I was willing to do that. I'm not willing to do that. It feels like selling my soul.
Yeah. And that's good to have that distinction where you're like, you know, I could be doing that, but I'm not going to be a dancing monkey in that way. Yes,
exactly. So yeah, it's it makes me sad because I look at kids, and I reposted something the other day about, you know, how the difference in kids cartoons now. Like there's, I don't know if you've seen Coco Melon. It's a kids cartoon that's like, I think they figured out, they did a study, there's actually an entire documentary on it, but they did a study that Coco Melon, they what do they call it? Like when they switch scenes, every 1 to 2 seconds on average. And it's all bright colors and it's like, you know, like they're here. And versus like the old cartoons like Peter Rabbit and like these kind of, again, that energy of relaxed, slow, conversation-based cartoons.
So I was going to bring this up before. It's called Flick Rate, I believe. I don't know if I coined this or I read it somewhere, but basically, like you were saying, TV on the onset, if you looked at how a scene would go for, it was like 5 minutes back in the day, where it would just be one room, people coming in, talking, and then over time, both with technology and the desire to keep the attention of the viewer, the flick rate has increased from 5 minutes down to 1 to 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But that's going to get to a point of not being sustainable. Like from 1 to 2 seconds, like what do we go to like 0.3 of a second? Like, there's going to be a point that's just detrimental. And no wonder there's so much more ADD being diagnosed these days. Because I've found, in addition to flick rate, the actual TV, what plays on that is social media with the scrolling. And what I've felt within myself is when there's a quicker flick rate or more scrolling, it seems to be that our mind works almost like a projector reel of an old movie. And so the more images that are quickly feeding through our mind, the quicker it speeds up our mind.
Yes.
And so I've noticed, say, with using a phone before bed, scrolling is really stimulatory for the mind, which is bad for sleep.
Yeah.
But there's been times where I've actually used a phone and then had like really good deep sleep. Yes, like, and I had the blue light filter on. So there's, a pretty clear difference between the scrolling and just the screen use.
Yes.
But I've also noticed if I use like caffeine, for example, it tends to speed up the rate of the mind.
Yes.
And then if you combine that with something like scrolling, you're going to be really stimulated. And I think in that state, it leads to like hyperfixation on the thing that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It was interesting, like what I said about that Coco Melon cartoon, because I'd never watched it before. So I YouTubed it. And I watched the first 60 seconds and I was like, I feel like I'm crawling up the walls because it is so much color, so much stimulus. And I'm thinking, here I am, an adult brain. I imagine like my 2-year-old cousin, watching this. And like, I'm like, that poor boy, like his brain's not developed, not fully developed. And so like, I can't imagine the impact that it would have. And I don't know, are you familiar with it's a TV show that's come out recently on Netflix called Adolescence? It's pretty full on. It's a show about basically the like incel culture, all of that kind of shit. Yeah. That is basically, it's a story of a 12-year-old boy who murders a girl, and basically how culture and society had him basically believe that that's appropriate. But the thing that I actually love about the show is they film all of their episodes in one take. And so it's done really creatively and really like it's very raw, like you almost feel like you're in the room kind of thing. So it's actually quite haunting because it's like, you feel like you're in the room.
yeah.
And it's been so interesting because I loved it. I like I said, I felt like I was there. I was enrolled in the storyline, and it was like a real kind of like psychological kind of deep dive. Some of the critique, I've seen pop up online is, it was boring, it was slow, like it lacked, like it didn't grab, it didn't grab them. And I'm like, yeah, of course, if you're used to these, what did you call them? Flick
rate. High flick rate.
Yeah, like if you're used to a higher flick rate, like of course you're going to find a one take like impossibly boring, because your mind's trained for
Exactly.
constantly,
That's like someone that's going to be using TikTok 90% of the time probably isn't going to be as enthralled by a blog post, by long form content.
Yeah.
But then also you're like, yes, that's training people to do that, but also there's a type of person that's drawn to that too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I mean, I think of I've got two people in mind in particular, love them dearly, and TikTok fiends. And I remember I used to like go around to their house and they'd be on the couch side by side. They were a couple side by side on TikTok, and I'd watch them just spend like hours would go by, just like scrolling, just watching all these different reels pop up, and I'm like, they're not even they're not even intentionally curated reels of a particular topic. It's just, like you might click that one and then that feeds you into this one, and so you're basically, you're just on the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
You're not intentionally going, okay, like I want to deep dive into understanding or learning about blah, blah, blah. You know, it's, yeah.
You know, I found that with mainstream media, so like I've purposely not watched free-to-air TV or media for a long time, but my mum does.
Yes.
And so when I've been around there, she's been watching it, and I found as it's come up, I'm like, I want to, you know, unpack each thing and like, you know, give my thoughts on it, but they don't create space for that, obviously. So it's just one thing after the next. So it's almost like, you know, the free-to-air version of TikTok there.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's some detriment that I see to that, because like when you're just like, oh, and it was just happening here, and then just did this, and then this did this, you don't have time to make sense of that.
Yeah,
so
you're
you're just, all you're able to do is internalize and go, oh, the world's fucked.
Yes. Well, it's so interesting you say that, because I mean, I've loosely been planning a bit of a global trip, and my dad watches the news. I don't. And, you know, so just spending time with him, I was being kind of exposed to like the mainstream news again. And so I was hearing stories of plane crashes, you know, terrorist attacks, bombings, stabbings, shootings, you know, like women being raped, like all this stuff. And, you know, like the women that died from alcohol poisoning in Thailand, like all of that. And of course, Thailand was one of the first places that I wanted to go. And so I caught myself, I was like, is now a good time for me to travel? Like the world seems extra fucked up at the moment. And so I was hesitating and doubting and kind of going, okay, maybe Thailand's not so safe. And, you know, maybe like, you know, these plane crashes in America and stuff that have occurred. I'm like, well, like America's up there on my list as well. Maybe I shouldn't go to America. And then I sat back and was like, hang on, why all of a sudden am I believing that the world's unsafe? Oh, because I was listening to all of the negative stuff curated by the news. And, you know, I mean, the truth is, like, that stuff happens often.
Yeah.
I just didn't know about it. So, you know,
exactly.
and of course, you know, like, it's going to make me feel a particular way when that's all I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So I had to catch myself on that one.
If you're out there in the world and you've got, let's say, like, you know, 9 times the amount of experience with those things as you're hearing from the media, it's going to be a perspective where you're like, you know, 1/10 of what makes up reality.
Yeah.
But for someone, if you're like not going out much and then that's all you're seeing, you're going to be like, oh, well, that's the perception.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think what would be really interesting is 2 things. Like, one, imagine if they had like, you know, the percentage probability of that. Like, let's say there's currently 17,000 planes in the sky, and this happened to one. So it's a 0.003% chance of this happening.
Yeah.
Or, you know, whatever it is. Or imagine a world where the mainstream media was all positive. Today, a puppy was saved.
Here's a video with squirrel riding some water skis. Yeah.
It probably wouldn't, you know, the problem is in this kind of late stage capitalist society we're in, drama, negative emotions, things that create strong reaction, even if negative, that drives attention.
Yeah. Well, and it's sorry, I cut you off there.
No, you don't.
It's a survival instinct as well. Like we're instinctually trained as, well, I don't want to say trained because it's instinctual, but we have this response of we want to know what the threats are so that we can
Stick in the
survive.
heart.
Yeah.
Have you heard that analogy?
No.
So basically, let's say in our ancestral times, it's dark, we're going through a park, and there's a stick on the ground. We'll see that as a snake. Because we're trained to identify the threat. It's better to hedge our bet towards the actual threat than to think, oh no, it's just a snake and then just a stick and then be big.
Yeah. So I mean, we instinctually look for the negatives so that we can avoid the threat, so we can survive it. So I mean, it makes sense that the news isn't all puppies and kittens and rainbows and squirrels on water skis. But you know, it's overkill. It's overkill where our minds are trained and conditioned to now just only see the negative and completely overlook all of the good out in the world because that's what we're hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really interesting, you might have found this, a long time without watching free air or mainstream media and then seeing it, the puppet show like absurdity that comes across by seeing it, like it just seems so over the top and dramatized now.
Yeah.
Where you're like, God, like I don't know if it's the advancement of like, technology, but you're like, it doesn't look real.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you tuned into any of the political stuff leading into the election.
I didn't.
I would just see little glimpses of it. But I'm like, does anyone fucking buy this shit? You know, like it's they're all just dancing monkeys, you know, saying whatever they've got to say to get the votes.
You know what really annoys me as the system we have, why it isn't a system of like, how much do you want to put, let's say you've got 100 points, how much do you want to put to military education? What do you want to, how do you want to handle this? Should we reserve gas supplies for ourselves before selling it overseas? Tick yes.
Yeah.
Should we give tax concessions to big companies or not? How much? You know, and if you just went through digitally and just did all that, and then you put the people in that can do the things,
Yes.
rather than this ambiguous system of like, well, we've got to vote for this party, but if it doesn't go to them, it'll be kicked up to them. You know, like it seems like a arguably intentionally confusing system.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, I walked in there and was like, I went in there with my dad and I turned to Dad and I was like, you would think that they would have a more clear-cut system figured out by now, even down to like, it was like you vote in pencil, you know, like you walk in and I mean, I don't know what it was like where you went to vote, but it was like the one that I went to, we walk in and it's just chaos. Like, you know, everyone's lined up, but then they don't have anyone at the front of the line until like they sort of have ropes. And instead of having a person, like ropes kind of showing you where to line up, and instead of having someone at the end of the ropes to then guide you where to go based on, you know, what's happening, they allowed the line to extend further out and then had someone there. So people were just fed up with waiting and just like going off to wherever. And so I'm like, you know, who knows, like what's happening? This person might just like get their name ticked off and then fuck off, or you know, and I was like, what? Like this is how we're running this is how we're deciding our political leaders for the country, and it's a fucking shit show.
Yeah, I made a comment. I was like, I'm surprised that you don't have an ID verification.
Yes,
like
I think this. Did you post that on social media?
I'm not sure that I did.
Oh, I saw someone posted that and I was like, no shit, like. I can get my dad to put a wig on and be like, no, it's appropriate.
Like the practicality of that happening is pretty low of like, you know, let's say an actual party organising like enough people to then get that many false votes. Like if they could organise that, we'd probably be living in a better country. But still, there's still the potential. It just seems like a low-hanging fruit of when you substantiate the person that you're identifying is there when there's like everyone has an ID. It's a
very bizarre system for something so important. It's like I really feel like the organisation is just completely lacking.
But I think the key thing was like when you go to vote, there's no understanding for like probably I'd say like 85% of people easily would not know what they're voting for, what the actual implications of each of those numbers mean. Like, there's the people that are totally into politics and they get it. But that's really the minority in this country. And the thing is, like, the people who are political tend to be like, oh, well, it's ignorance, you should know. And even that can be a fallacy because they bicker within each of their own parties. Oh, well, liberalism, this would have been right, you were wrong. And in the process of them having that political debate, they feel like they've taken action, but all they've really done is argue amongst each other and there's no actual tangible benefit.
Exactly.
So, you know, and then you got other people that are not political and they're like, well, I can't really fucking spending however long it would take to get an understanding of this system to then do anything that wouldn't really get any change anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a shit show.
It is. Well, I feel like good to end on that note. Is there anything else that you have springing to mind that you'd like to share?
No, I mean, I want to say that if anyone wants to get in contact, if you've taken something from what we've shared here, then please reach out on social media. So you can find me just at my name, Briana Bowley. It's Briana with one N. Can I also do a little shameless plug of my nervous system regulation?
100%.
Cool. So I've created this quiz, which helps you to identify what your predominant state is. So the dominant state that you're operating from in your day-to-day life, which then has a feed-on effect, as I said earlier, where we create from determines what we create. So if you're always in survival state, you're going to create more of the same. So I created this quiz so that people could get a bit more of a like tangible feel for where they're at. And so, yeah, that's available at www.nsquiz.com. Takes about 2 minutes. And then from there, I send out a bunch of free content, as well as some of my like cheaper paid offerings. So that, yeah, you can start to get started in shifting that state.
Yeah, awesome. Lovely. Well, thank you for joining me on the Cheap Podcast.
Thank you.
Coming for a hug.
Appreciate it.
Quick nervous system regulator.